Can you talk about your article? So you wrote this article for
Yes.
LitHub. I'll link to it in the description for everybody who's
hmm
listening. What pornographic literature shows us about human
hmm
nature?
hmm Yeah. So I think the essay basically begins by introducing some experiences I had while writing my novel, White Wedding, which I consider to be a pornographic novel. And I'm using like the definitions of pornographic and erotic as like delineated by writers like Audre Lorde, who would call the erotic that which expands, connect like through sensory experience, we expand our connection to others. There's also an emotional quality of that. There's that like other element of like that human connection quality, while the pornographic sort of forecloses some of that um, net other meaning, if that makes sense, or that it's not about emotional connection so much as it is that only the physical experience. Now, Audre Lorde would view that negatively, but then we have, but I still think that language is like a useful distinction. That pornographic is about just like the continuous impulse and thrust toward lust, desire, and the physical release. There's not as much the emotional or psychological element of that. Okay, so that was one thing in calling it pornographic. But so I sort of introduce also a quote from Susan Sontag talking about the pornographic imagination, this idea that in pornographic literature, we're following an extreme consciousness of some sort that, again, is driven towards that fulfillment of lust. And then I look at the way two classics of pornographic literature, The Story of O by Pauline Riage and then Hog by Samuel Delany, deal with capturing that extreme consciousness and that psychological distance in their use of point of view. And pornographic point of view was kind of my entry point to writing this essay. I wanted to think about this pornographic literature from the angle of considering craft and not so much launching a moral defense of it, I think, which has been done many times before and is a an endless and both endless and fruitful conversation. And then, yeah, so it's kind of a breakdown. Does that feel like a summary?
Yeah, that
I'm
sounds
a
like
little
the
underslept today, so if I start really rambling, you got to just stop me.
no, that sounds like the
Yeah.
article I read.
Okay. Okay.
So, I mean, I think craft in and of itself is that warrants the existence of just about any genre.
Oh.
So I've never followed the sort of morality debate on porn, but I also never questioned it. It's a part of it's a part of us.
There's When I was writing my book, I read a lot of different feminist theorists to get like a wide variety of points of view on that too. And um, I found them all productive, like anti-porn feminism and pro-porn feminism. Or hearing all those viewpoints were productive for my thinking about the genre. And of course, some people are thinking more about movies, videos, also like an industry that actually can be abusive to real living bodies versus the realm of the literary, which is of course no actual people were harmed in the in the making of this book situation too. So that's a distinction. Yeah. Oh, and yeah, I guess the other thing I should say, because this is sort of a point I felt was important to close the essay on, is that this feeling that in writing the pornographic, you are writing solely and focusing on the physical, there's not really a person who we need to understand in the essay. There's not like a trauma background or a reason for different modes of desire, kinks or fetishes. But while writing that, you also, and creating a character to move through a literary space, I did at least come up against that challenge of, well, a physical body like exists, is seen and reacted to by the other people populating that fictional world, right? So it's racialized, it's gendered, it's sexed. And so there's a way in which those things influence that body's access to different spaces, what the physical ways that it can, the physical like materials even just around that body. And so I found that to be kind of an interesting knot there, right? Of like thinking about one element of the self, like the way we're perceived as we move through the world by others, and also like trying to write sort of a defiant and like selfless, self-negating force in driving forward in the narrative. So I became interested in that question of both how we don't need to have a sort of solution for desire, but also how much does a sort of tangle of information kind of shape potentially like subconsciously human desire as well. Yeah, like the question of how much we consent to our desires was not so much in the essay, but was something I thought about in the book.
At what point does it stop being porn? Like if you were to introduce trauma into it, does it stop being porn?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the strict lines, and I'm not going to tell someone which words they want to use. I think, I mean, there are things that happen in pornographic books that can be considered, traumatic. It's not like things are free of pain or suffering. In the story of O, the character often is she is a submissive in a mansion of dominance. She's also often wondering, like, why am I experiencing this pain? Why do I dread this and then want this at the same time? But I think what keeps that from being I think the key for me is refusing to sort of explain, right? To refusing to to force something as complicated as desire into like an easily sort of Freudian, like one-to-one, there's an answer to this puzzle, right? Instead of like kind of reveling in the complications that are inherent to living to sex, but also just like being a person in general. I think sex is just a focus of that book but I think some of these complications of how we are, who we are, I'm interested in more broadly too. And I don't want answers, I want exploration of them, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the best way to go about writing is don't write for the answer. I find that that's often the difference between young writing and mature writing is the people writing for the answer versus writing just to explore.